How about we talk about the Constitution a little bit as applies to current events? What do we do about a situation in which a president of the United States, his appointed attorney general, the director of the FBI, the U.S. attorney also appointed by the president of the United States, and the special counsel appointed by the attorney general of the United States, what do we do as a country if they stonewall the House of Representatives, a majority of whom are Republicans? What do we do as a country if the National Archives, also part of the executive branch, is also stonewalling these Republicans? In other words, what do we do if separation of powers is being violated by the executive branch, and the executive branch is the only body, we think, that can enforce the law? It is the executive. And this is what I want to talk to you about, because we've reached this point. We have the most dangerous FBI today since the history of the FBI. We have the most dangerous Department of Justice since it was founded by Ulysses S Grant in 1870. We have the most dangerous Attorney General since George Washington handpicked an Attorney General in 1795. The Attorney General didn't actually become a person who would be confirmed by the Senate and the head of the Department of Justice until the Department of Justice was founded, as I said, in 1870. You know, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Attorney, none of them are in the Constitution. They were all created by Congress. So how can it be that they can stiff-arm the United States Congress? Well, here's the deal. They can't. Let's say Jim Jordan or James Comer hold hearings, but they need information. They need witnesses. They ask them to voluntarily provide them, and the executive branch says no. Let's say they then subpoena them, and the executive branch says no, or they redact information to such an extent you can't even figure out what they're talking about. Let's say they ask the Department of the Treasury for wire transfers involving Hunter Biden or a member of the president's family, apart from Hunter Biden, they say no. What do? Remember the January 6th committee? The January 6th committee benefited from the fact that the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney, were on their side, same party. They benefited from the fact that Christopher Wray was bending over backwards to accommodate them and the Democrats. And they benefited from the fact that the head of the executive branch was plenary power, Joe Biden, is a Democrat. And so they used the FBI, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and all the rest to go after Republicans, whether they're state legislators or state legislatures that are Republican, whether they're pro-lifers who are Republican, whether they're people who were merely parading and quote-unquote trespassing on the Capitol grounds. They went after them too. Obviously, they're going after former President Trump. Can you name any Democrats that they've targeted? Is it the Democrats are angels? No, it's not. And so we have a House that wants to do an investigation, consider the Biden family, that a special counsel should be doing, but the Attorney General refuses to appoint in the case of their finances and foreign dealings. Well, I've looked into this very, very carefully, ladies and gentlemen. The House of Representatives, the Republicans, need to preserve their authority under the Constitution. It's called self-preservation. That's the legal phrase, self-preservation. The Republican House has to preserve separation of powers and has to preserve our governmental system. There's supposed to be a balance, a negotiation. You sort of work things out, one branch with another. But if another branch is corrupt in the sense that they're using the law against their political opponents, and they're corrupt in the sense that they basically dare you to do anything about it because they're not going to enforce it on the executive side, you have to act. Or the House of Representatives and Congress more broadly will seek to be the power that they need to be in this triumvirate government, or this three-part government. So what can they do? Well, we have a history. So we look at our history, and history didn't begin yesterday. History began when the nation was founded. Congress has an implied or inherent power to hold individuals or entities in contempt, just as the judiciary has an implied power of review. Again, judicial review is not in the Constitution. These departments and these offices I mentioned, they're not in the Constitution. But Congress has the power to legislate, to pass budgets, spending bills, borrow. Congress has a lot of power. And if it cannot enforce that power, then it has no power. Even the Supreme Court has recognized this. So if Congress is being reasonable, they're asking for information to go over classified information that was taken, say, by Biden and others. If they want to look at, the Supreme Court has said the tax returns of a former president, presumably they can look at the tax returns, the S corporations of a sitting president. And by the way, of the former Speaker of the House and Supreme Court justices as well. Supreme Court opened the door to that. If they want to look at how the Federal Bureau of Investigation is functioning, which is a very, very important matter given the fact that we've now learned that they've been monitoring American citizens and censoring the distribution of information on these social outlets, among other things, and given the way they conduct themselves with the SWAT teams and so many other reasons to look in the FBI is not free to just blow off our elected representatives. And neither is the Attorney General of the United States, who has targeted parents, who has targeted pro-lifers, who has targeted Republican legislatures, who's targeted a former president, and all the rest of it. So they have to have the power to act. These are extraordinarily dangerous times, grave times. And so the Republicans in the House have pulled together committees, they've asked for information, they've asked for witnesses, and they need to enforce it. Now, here's what they do. If this can't get worked out, they look at this inherent implied contempt power that I talked about. This has been upheld by the Supreme Court in the past on the rare occasion it's been used and the rare occasion the court has ruled. It hasn't been used since the 1930s. It was used earlier in our history when we did not have a Department of Justice. And what it basically means is, for instance, the House, or the Senate, but the House in this case, can hold an individual in contempt. They vote in the relevant committee, let's say the Judiciary Committee, it comes to the floor for a vote, and then the House has to vote it up or down. You would hope the Republicans would vote it up, that it's important enough, but we do have a few stragglers out there who are desperate to be liked by CNN, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, and they seem to put that ahead of country. Well, that's unacceptable in a case like this. We're talking about separation of powers, a real battle. And I can assure you, if the shoe were on the other foot, the Democrats would be very quick to pull the trigger. And so then, let's say the House of Representatives votes to hold the person in contempt, and it's referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they blow it off. Do you remember when that happened before? It happened with Eric Holder when he was Attorney General of the United States on Fast and Furious, remember? When he authorized gun dealers to sell weapons to drug cartels for some strange reason. They wanted to track the guns, one of which wound up killing one of our border agents. Remember all that? And the House wanted to see some of the underlying memoranda and information that he relied on, Holder, and they refused. They held him in contempt, and nothing ever happened. Now, the January 6th committee held people in contempt, and the U.S. Attorney, of course, has gone after several of them in that case for matters that seem ridiculous. People asserting their Fifth Amendment rights, people asserting that there's at least limited privilege and so forth. But here there's no justification at all. Now what happens? Congress votes, they send it to the U.S. Attorney, and the U.S. Attorney says, nah, I don't think so. Congress has the power. Listen to me. This is not kook stuff. It's not black helicopter stuff. It's been done. Dust off the law. Congress has the power to send the sergeant of arms to secure that individual. That is, to arrest the individual. The executive branch plays no role. And they actually have the authority to take the individual and jail the individual for a period of time. Now, there are due process rights and so forth, but not nearly as extensive as when you're talking about criminally charging somebody, because they're not being criminally charged with anything. They're being held in contempt of the House of Representatives. And that individual can have a hearing, an open hearing, in front of a committee, let's say the Judiciary Committee. They can ask their questions and so forth and so on, and they can release the individual or hold the individual over for more information. Now, it's a very unpleasant process, as you can understand. But like so many things the Democrats do, and so many things Biden and Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray and Nancy Pelosi have done, they break tradition. They're like bulls in a china shop, breaking everything in their sight. And I'm telling the Republicans in the House of Representatives, it's one thing to investigate, crucial. It's one thing to issue subpoenas, crucial. It's another thing to enforce them. I know you will be attacked by the media, but the media is corrupt. They are left-wing. And you'll be attacked by some of these phony tenured professors. So many of them are radical Marxists, and almost all of them are Democrats. So ignore them too. Take some courage from what's going on in the state of Israel, where Netanyahu and his majority government are putting in place true reforms where they are fundamentally altering the way the judiciary and the law works there, because they're completely out of control and they undermine representative government in Israel constantly. Well, we have a situation now with Joe Biden's executive branch is undermining representative government and unleashing criminal law enforcement against people with whom they disagree. It's one thing to investigate. It's one thing to collect information. It's quite another to enforce. And so I want to suggest that the Republicans take a very close look at this.
Want to see more Mark Levin? Go to levintv.com and subscribe now.